I used to work at a hotel and did the night shift. A hotel wasn't really popular due to the fact we were in a small town that didn't really attract outsiders. Because of this, I wasn't used to anything crazy happening. Well, until this night. One night, I got a call from a lady in room 304. Hoping it was just a room service request, she began complaining about a loud noise coming from another room. She claimed she heard loud banging on the walls and screams from the right side of her room. She then began to tell me how she kept hearing a lady cry and a guy's voices screaming at her. I looked up the rooms on that floor and I saw room 306. It couldn't have been this room. I didn't even see anyone checked into that room. Room 306 was the last room in the hall, so there could not have been any other room until the lady heard it from the right side. I called room 306 and didn't even get an answer. I called my supervisor to see what I should do, and he suggests calling the on-site security and that I should follow them up to the room with the key card. As we got up the elevator, we could hear loud commotion even from down the hall as soon as the elevator doors opened. My heart started racing as I knew the security guard and I probably weren't ready for what we were about to see. As we got closer and closer, I started hesitating. However, the noises had stopped. I was so paranoid since this was my first experience like this. I would look back at the elevator and the stairs to see which would be my fastest escape route in case shit hit the fan. I mean, it had to be something crazy if these people weren't even checked in. I handed the security guard the key card to the room as I took 2 steps back. The security guard then opened the door slowly. As the door slightly opened, we could see a dark room with barely any lighting coming from a dim lamp. As we entered the room, we immediately felt super cold as the room had the air conditioning on full blast. The shower was on as steam came from under the bathroom door as we passed it. As we walked in more, we noticed a lady in a red lacy bra and black panties faintly crying in the bed as our eyes just got adjusted to the light. Thank God it was just her on the bed. Okay, maybe that sounded wrong, but thank God there wasn't some crazy guy jumping at us already. Well, at least not yet. She was facing away from us as we entered. Frank approached her and asked if everything was okay. She sort of stopped crying and rolled over. When she did, a terrifying wave came over me as I saw her pale skin and bloody appearance as she just stared at us. The shower had stopped. When this happened, the security guard and I was still in shock at what we saw. The door opened as it hit the door stopper hard, and the guy came out yelling. "What the hell are you doing here?" asked the guy. He was about 6'5" and had a very muscular appearance. The security guard didn't even hesitate. He immediately tased him as he reacted quickly, still in shock at what's going on. He then handcuffed him before the cops got there. As we had a better look at the lady, she appeared to be cut open. The cops had informed us that this guy was a notorious rapist. He is known to hide in hotels, kidnap women who stay there and mutilate them. I was terrified after hearing this. I didn't know how he could have broken into the room. I was also shocked that there was a damn serial killer in the hotel I worked. I found out the next day that the woman who was kidnapped by the guy was staying in room 202 and I'm checked out for over 2 days. I resigned from my job the week after since I didn't want to work night shifts anymore. After this, I didn't even think about checking in the hotel again. I also forgot to mention, there was another lady who also didn't check out for over 3 days. I used to work nights for the city as a gardener. I was assigned to work at a graveyard one night to spray the weeds growing around the headstones. I was used to working nights, but this would be the first time I did it at a graveyard. A lot of talk goes around about graveyards being haunted at night, but it really doesn't faze me. I didn't really believe in evil spirits, ghosts, or anything crazy like that. I kinda just shrugged it off and decided to go that night. I began working and almost an hour in, I didn't really mind it at all, besides the fact it was extremely cold and there wasn't much light. I played my radio to keep my mind off the fact I was in a graveyard at night, but I still get this weird feeling like I keep telling myself graveyards are not haunted, graveyards are not haunted, as if I'm trying to persuade myself to believe something I already know. For some reason, I had this sense of fear. I felt terrified and didn't even know why. It was like someone was behind me. I had this weird feeling as if I was being watched. I was sort of scared to look off to the distance towards the other headstones. I was on the far right side of the graveyard. As I turned around, I didn't notice anything at first. I moved slightly to the right and unveiled another headstone, just a larger one in the distance that I couldn't see the first time. I was super paranoid at this point. I began to feel goosebumps all over my body and a shock of fear traveled through my veins. I saw a weird dark figure on top of the headstone. I walked closer to make sure my eyes weren't playing tricks with me. As I walked closer and closer, I could see an old guy sitting on top of the headstone. I yelled at him and asked what he was doing there. I told him to leave because of the chemicals in the air from the weeds. He didn't even say anything back as he just kept staring at me. He stared at me without even blinking or moving. Our ranger walked the hell out of there and grabbed my supplies. I was so creeped out by the old man I decided to take the rest of the night off. I drove home thinking for reasons as to why the hell the old man could have been just sitting there. It still creeps me out to this day when I drive by graveyards during the night. I refuse to return back to that graveyard after that night, and I've told my experience about this many times. I still wonder if this old man was even a real living human being, or possibly an apparition. I can't say that I don't believe in ghosts anymore after this night. This experience is a little different than usual, and always the most terrifying when I tell it. I used to work for a relatively small security company. A long time before, we had got a contract with a new factory that needed guards to stay there overnight, just to watch their merchandise. It wasn't really a hard gig at all. I guess the hardest part was really staying awake. Basically, all we had to do was stay in there for 8 to 12 hours when everyone was gone. The only catch to it was I would be by myself in a completely empty factory overnight. Surprisingly, I did the job for about 2 years and never experienced anything crazy or supernatural. It was until this day I met a guy named Dennis. One night, my post commander had called me and told me that a new security officer would be coming at around 5 a.m. and to show him the ropes. It wasn't really much to learn, since all you had to do was walk around the building, check doors, and sit half the time. It was about 5:10 a.m. and I went outside wondering if the guy would show up. I usually don't go outside during my shift, but I knew it would make it easier for the new guy to come if he had seen me outside. I figured maybe he couldn't find the right place. About 10 minutes go by and I see a car pull up, stop, then backs up and drives away. I was clearly visible to the car. I had no idea as to why the car would leave. I doubt it could have been someone other than a security guard. I mean, who drives back and forth like this in this time of day? The car had passed about 3 more times before pulling up and parking. I saw the guy in the car just staring at me. I gave him an idiotic look, as he was probably just some dummy that didn't know where he was. I asked him if he was the new security guard. He opened the car door and I could hear the commotion between him and it seemed to be a couple of boys in the back seat. After 3 minutes of me wondering what the fuck was going on, he gets out of the car. The guy was fucked up looking. He looked as if he had pulled his clothes out of the dumpster and just jumped into some shit. He was extremely short, maybe 5 feet, and the most overweight security officer I've ever seen in my life. He had extremely thick glasses as if they were made with bulletproof glass. He started laughing as he walked over to me and said, "How's it going? Guess I found the right spot." His voice was real high-pitched. I was weirded out. He extended his hand to shake mine, and without thinking too much, I shook it as I began to realize he only had one finger. He said his name was Dennis. One of the kids got out of the car and asked him if they can get a drink of water. The kid looked as if he was a mini version of him, as he was also overweight and had fingers missing. He then yelled at him, "Get back in the damn car and don't you get out again!" I was in shock over this. What the fuck did they think of when they hired this guy? I mean, the company does hire oddballs, but this guy was a plain psycho, and I just had a 5-minute encounter. I asked him where his uniform was, and he replied that he didn't have them because his size had to be ordered. I didn't want to ask what was up with the missing fingers, as I felt that he might have been insulted. I mentioned to him as we walked back to the building that there was a water faucet for his son to drink out of, and it was okay to let him in. He immediately told me he would be fine and that he could drink a whole bottle of water before he came. I was worried about the kids as he let them in the car. I showed Dennis around the factory and began to notice how horribly bad he smelled. As I showed him around, I could tell his attention was not focused on learning, but to ask me strange questions like, did I have a crush on anyone that worked there, or could I hunt on this property? He even asked me if someone had broken in and trapped me in the office, what could I do? The creepy part was, I was in the office at the time. He was standing in the doorway just staring at me with a weird smile. I told him that there wasn't much more to learn. He kept asking me if there were cameras and where were they. He also asked if he could bring his kids in there if he had no babysitter. He finally left the building after his small talk showed little interest in me. He would say, "We are going to be good friends, even if you don't think so now." I freaked out after this and told the post commander as I left the post at the end of my shift. I told him a guy named Dennis had showed up and he asked me, "Dennis?" He then told me to hold on. As I waited, he told me he had accidentally texted the wrong number to show up at our job. He then told me that there were nobody named Dennis or any security guard that fit the description of the guy who came. I told him more details about the kids and how they were missing fingers. I told him that I would then call him back after reviewing the camera that had a shot of his vehicle. I reported that vehicle information to the authorities and told them my weird experience. They then told me something that will haunt me forever. They told me that the car had been reported stolen and the guy matched the description of a local sex offender who had been known to kidnap and torture overweight children. I dropped my phone in shock, only to tell the cops even more details about my experience. I called my postal commander requesting I get another post, as I was terrified about the guy knowing my name and information. I still don't understand why he would even want to come to the factory, especially knowing a text from the post commander was not for him. I never saw that guy again, but I'm always paranoid to see any car pull up if I'm working graveyard shift. I began to think about all the weird questions he asked, and it all started to add up when he asked me if he could bring children in there. What if he tried to kill me and replace me? Not sure how he could get my job if he was in the system as a criminal on the run. But then again, he did seem like a dumb criminal. It's been more than 10 years and that experience still bothers me. The faces of the little boy and the man that pretended to be a security guard still haunt me to this day in my nightmares. Still to this day, I'm not sure if that guy ever got caught. The post commander at that time also got terminated for the dumb mistake he made. Nowadays, they're required to call and not text.